any paradigm that we currently have.
Sure.
But I think we can learn from its effects. I think we can learn from its effects on witnesses, the physical evidence that you mentioned, and there is some, not as much as we'd like, but there is physical evidence to provide sufficient proof that we're dealing with a physical phenomenon. It's not entirely psychological. It's not entirely hallucinatory, certainly, although those both have something to bear on the problem. But in any case, we're dealing with a legitimate scientific enigma, and like with the Martian anomalies I mentioned, it's embarrassing, frankly, that the academic and scientific communities aren't addressing this with the rigor that I think it certainly deserves.
No, if anything, they make fun of it. And
exactly, they make fun of it and ridicule it. But at the same time, you have people in the background who aren't as visible, and they're quietly interested. So you have this invisible college element, and it's the same with Mars anomalies. So there's an interesting sociological point to this as well that needs to be exposed. It needs to be brought to the surface of, so it achieves a much better showing among the lay audience. And I think that's ultimately going to establish a better dialogue. Better scientific and a better...
I think so too, Mac. When we come back, let's talk more about this theory that they might be coming from within this planet. I'm George Norrie. We'll be back in just a moment on Coast to Coast AM. For just 15 cents a day, pennies, you can sign up for Streamlink and get downloading and podcasts and also the brand new feature as well now, special feature, the iPhone iPod Touch. It really works wonders for Streamlink members on their own mobile device. And it's also free to all users of the iPhone and for other features as well. And there's an alien game. It's Alien Abduction that one of our own listeners created, and it's incredible. So if you're interested in Streamlink, just go to coasttocoastam.com. And welcome back to Coast to Coast. I'm George Norrie. Our special guest tonight, Mac Tonnies. He's the author of After the Martian Apocalypse and the Crypto-Terrestrials. And let's get into some of these theories. It is fascinating, Mac, to assume that these ETs are coming from within the planet. Now, you earlier talked about maybe they were extraterrestrials living within this planet. So, I'm taking the assumption that they came here a long time ago. But what if they are just merely earthbound creatures that live there?
Well, I take the standpoint that they evolved in conjunction with us. And in fact, they might be human in some essential respects. So the word alien, when I use the word alien to describe these hypothetical beings, I mean that in the true sense of just other, not necessarily extraterrestrial. We tend to associate the word alien with coming from outer space. And I don't think that's necessarily the case. The evidence suggests a bipedal humanoid species that's very recognizable, that even uses human-like gestures and mannerisms, and even displays a pretty good familiarity with our language. The Hill encounter, I think, as the prototypical alien abduction. It's interesting to look at the way that the mannerisms and the way that these beings behaved when they abducted these two humans. And the very theatric nature, the very theatric way in which the abduction unfolded, showing the star map to Betty Hill, for example,
sure,
having a kind of lengthy clinical discussion with her, explaining what the aliens were doing here and why. When I look at these accounts, and not only the Hills but lots of others, I'm struck by how unlike a genuine extraterrestrial spacefaring civilization this seems like. It seems like something closer to home. It seems like, again, maybe it's that trickster element at work. But if we are dealing with a palpable phenomenon, a flesh and blood species, is it inconceivable that we're dealing with something that evolved right here on Earth and lives among us? And I realize it's an extremely paranoid idea, and it would seem to fly in the face of anthropology and evolution as we know it. But and I guess that's kind of the challenge I present in my forthcoming book, The Crypto-Terrestrials, is this something that's potentially testable? Could there be some sort of remnant species that survives on this planet and hides its own existence. And I think a very thorough reading of the UFO literature suggests that there might be something to this idea. Maybe not. Maybe it is extraterrestrials. Maybe it's something even weirder. Maybe it's some form of symbiosis with beings from another dimension, whatever that might entail. But I think that the idea that we're dealing with humanoid beings, physical beings that are alien, but nonetheless terrestrial, deserves some attention that it really hasn't gotten. Some authors have touched on it. Jacques Vallée, certainly, John Keel
right.
In his Ultra-Terrestrials. And those are both very useful starting points. But perhaps we need to dig a little deeper.
Well, Vallée calls them messengers of deception. And he has changed over the years. You know, a long time, or even that movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, that was based somewhat on his experience, the Frenchman playing his part, basically. He's changed. He no longer believes that they're ETs from other planetary systems, that they are messengers of deception.
When he first began researching UFOs, he was reasonably confident that the mystery would be solved, that they'd start looking at cases and they would probably find that it was an extraterrestrial invasion. I'm using the word invasion. I don't mean that in its alarmist sense, but that we were dealing with visiting extraterrestrials. And he thought that was a good hypothesis, and that might be borne out by a sophisticated study. But that hasn't happened. Like you mentioned, this phenomenon seems to be deliberately elusive. It keeps evading us one way or another, to the point where it looks like we're never going to solve this. And that's led to, the exopolitics movement. That's led to this notion that if we keep asking the government will unveil the truth. Well, certainly the government knows some things about the UFO phenomena that it's not revealing openly, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it knows what's going on. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's someone who knows the entire picture. I could be wrong on that. Part of me kind of wishes I was wrong on that, but I don't buy into that rather X-Files vision of the government as this monolithic entity that is hiding the truth in a warehouse, a la Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah. You know, I had an opportunity this weekend to watch The Mist, Stephen King's Mist.
Excellent movie.
And it is a great movie. And, you know, I like to wait until they come out on DVD or they hit the big screen at the big screen for your house. And so I don't go to the movies a lot. But it was a movie that also makes you think. There was an area within the movie, Mac, where they talked about how scientists were playing around and experimenting, and they opened up a window, a portal, and these creatures came through. And is that conceivable with what we're seing today? Some kind of a portal is opened, and they come
maybe
through.
That's why they shut down the LHC.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's.
Point.
I don't. It's a fun notion to play with, and I don't think we're there yet. I think we're making like the whole idea of parallel universes. That's becoming a commonly used term, thanks to string theory and other efforts like that. The idea of a multiverse, that we exist simultaneously with like soap bubbles within soap bubbles, connected to other soap bubbles, and these are all individual universes that are constantly merging. This has become a rather cut and dry, well, not cut and dry, but it's become a rather commonplace thing to talk about, whereas only just a few years ago it would have sounded ludicrous. So while there might be some reality behind what they're talking about, I don't think that we have the energy, number one, to open up a portal into another universe. But I guess that doesn't mean that someone else hasn't. One possible explanation for the UFO phenomenon would be that maybe our brothers and sisters or our future selves in some other world have developed the technology that allows them to open a window and come through, and that's not without some appeal. I'm not sure if it explains everything, but certainly if we were able to locate a single point, if there is indeed just one window open, that would certainly go a long way towards explaining this. Wouldn't it be fun to go into that window? Wouldn't it be fun to plunge head first into that?
As long as you can come back.
Visit their other world, yeah, and then come back and report back. Kind of like the scenario in Contact with Jodie Foster.
The descriptions of these ETs come in an incredible variety. We hear the Greys, praying mantis type looking creatures, Nordiques. They look like us. They have the same physical structure. Then we have reptilians. What's your take on what they might look like?
My take is that these beings, the gray serves as a useful template for looking at all of them. Reading old accounts of occupants before the gray alien became the consumer archetype that it is now, you still find accounts of beings that are tantalizingly like the grays. The woman encountered by Antonio Villas-Boas that I mentioned, if you take away her hair, she would look very much like the being on the cover of Willie Strieber's Communion. She had large eyes